For years, I heard the Yakuza franchise as one worth diving into. I'd heard of the Yakuza legends Majima and Kiryu, of the rubber bullet heard round the world, and of the neon-stained streets of Kamurocho. With each breath, the Yakuza fans spread the praises of this series. You're watching Rail Deal Games, and this year, I set out to play every Yakuza Like a Dragon game ever made. And to commemorate the conclusion of this year of Yakuza process, I'll be ranking all 17 games in the franchise. It took a long time to complete this gaming goal, but through perseverance, I made it through the doldrums of the series and some serious burnout at times. I can definitively say that I've become a serious fan of RGG's type of game design and storytelling after rolling credits on the most recent game in the series, Infinite Wealth. Having played all the games in a row this year, except for Like a Dragon Ishin, which I played last year as a test to see whether I really wanted to commit to playing all of the other games in the series. I'm going into this ranking without a nostalgia bias or recency bias, since I've waited a couple weeks after finishing the last game to write this script. I will be spoiling sections of each of these games in this video, so this is your spoiler warning if you've not finished any of the games in this series yet. With all of that established, let's dive right in. Number 17. The worst game in the franchise is undeniably Dead Souls. The thing is, if this game had a better control scheme, gameplay, and encounter design, I don't think it would be the worst game in the series. Wild spin-off games like this can be a lot of fun. Think of how crazy different Final Fantasy Tactics is from the other games in the franchise. What makes Tactics a good spin-off whereas Dead Souls isn't, is that it has a great story, awesome gameplay, and the best progression system in that series. Seeing Ryuji Goda with a chain gun arm almost makes the game worth watching a playthrough of, and honestly that would be enough for the price of admission if the gameplay matched the cool factor. This holds true for essentially every other character too. I actually wish more franchises would have these crazy weird spin-offs, and during the 2000s it used to happen a fair bit, but Dead Souls is the cautionary example of how disastrous this move can be when the game that comes out is severely unfun to play. Number 16. I enjoyed Kiryu's chapters of this title, but I bounced off of it during Saijima's super slow section. Yakuza as a franchise is well known for its focus on narrative, repeating cities like Kamurocho, and fun minigame design. The hunting minigame in Yakuza 5 is an example of how RGG sometimes manages to lose their way in terms of the fun factor of their minigames. This combined with simply awful pacing throughout the entire story of this game makes it not worth slogging through the rest of the experience to complete, even though the ending of this game matters a lot for future games in the series. I recommend watching a movie cut of this game as it is far more enjoyable than trying to actually play it. Number 15. The only thing I know about Fist of the North Star is the meme. お前はもう死んでいる。何? And how it partially inspired both Berserk and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I have been wanting to watch it for years, but I have to say, my first encounter with Fist isn't especially positive. I don't even think Lost Paradise is bad, but it lacks the magic of RGG's other games. To their credit, Fist of the North Star seems incredibly difficult to make a game adaptation for. It might have been better for this game to be more along the lines of God Hand, since I'm pretty sure that game is partially inspired by Fist too. That level-based approach would create more of an emphasis on the fighting areas of Fist, which I hazard a guess are its most iconic aspects. I mean, Dragon Ball games focus almost exclusively on 1v1 or team v team fights for a reason. That's the part of the series that is the most fun in a gameplay sense. I applaud RGG for trying something different with this one, and that's what I would say is the best thing about this studio. They aren't opposed to taking massive risks with their games, and as we'll see later on this list, some of their best games are the products of this risk-taking behavior. Number 14. I love the look of PS2 games. Playing games like the first Yakuza gives me nostalgia, despite the fact I never played it as a kid. The issue with older games is rarely ever the way they look. It's the gameplay that usually doesn't age well. Early 3D games were still trying to figure out the best way of designing engaging interactive experiences with that third dimension. Yakuza just doesn't play that well. However, the story is insanely good, and that's what puts it higher on this list than the previous games. I'll save talking about why I like the story for when we get to Kiwami though. Number 13. Yakuza 2 improves upon Yakuza in fantastic ways, with tighter gameplay, a more interesting antagonist, and a more well-defined world. The story is a little worse than the first game, but Yakuza 2 doesn't have that simply awful fight near the end with commandos that the original has. It also has Ryuji Goda, who is one of the better antagonists Kiryu has ever been up against. Just like I said with the previous entry though, I'll save talking more about Ryuji Goda for when Kiwami 2 comes up. Number 12. The major thing keeping Judgment out of the top 10 is its pacing. With the exception of Yakuza 5, Judgment has the worst pacing out of any RGG game. I even like Yagami, Kaito, Saori, and the other characters in this game, but RGG doesn't know where to take these characters quite yet. Yagami needs some type of coherent story arc like Kiryu and Ichiban get. And if there is a third Judgment game in the works, I hope that's what RGG focuses on. The way they change up the 3D brawler gameplay completely with Judgment is especially commendable. Kiryu's combat styles were far from being boring, as RGG managed to remix the gameplay of each Kiryu game enough to make them distinct from the previous ones. That being said, Yagami needed a different type of gameplay to account for the fact that he's just not as strong or proficient as Kiryu is. Judgment's gameplay design fits the character of Yagami quite well, with the addition of the mortal wound mechanic and fighting styles that play into Yagami's more agile nature. RGG innovates on these changes even more with Yagami's second game, as we'll see later on this list. Number 11. I wasn't sure where RGG was going to take Kiryu's story in Gaiden, considering the way Yakuza 6 ends. Gaiden's story does have a few crazy twists and turns, but the gameplay is what really puts Gaiden up this high. As a further development of the system introduced in Yakuza 6, Gaiden adds spy gadgets to the gameplay, allowing Kiryu to switch between his Dragon of Dojima style and his new Daidoji based one. These gadgets are super fun to play around with, and I especially like the spider one, which allows the player to throw enemies into each other. Considering the ragdoll effects in the Yakuza 6 system, this one leads to some pretty hilarious moments where the enemies keep flopping around long after being thrown. As for the story, I found Gaiden to be pretty alright. It's missing a lot of the high points present in the top 10 of this list, but it does a pretty good job at setting up Kiryu's active role in Infinite Wealth, alongside explaining his appearance in Like a Dragon, which is what this game was supposed to do. Number 10. I didn't care too much for Yakuza 3 when I finished it, but Kiryu's Morning Glory arc is quite important to the development of his character. The rest of the series constantly refers back to the building blocks laid down in Yakuza 3. Even Infinite Wealth makes callbacks to Kiryu's days as the head of Morning Glory, and that game came out 15 years after Yakuza 6. On top of this, Yakuza 3 has some great moments on its own, with the final boss fight against Yoshitaka Mine, the CIA interference in foreign politics via Richardson, and Saki's mistreatment by her mother. These are all moments that truly stand out in this game. That's only scratching the surface too, as this game is full of some awesome scenes. Yakuza 3 definitely needs its own Kiwami treatment, and considering the fact that the really only bad thing about this game is its 7th gen era gameplay and art direction, a Kiwami remake would catapult this game into the range of the 4th or 5th slot for me. Number 9. Yakuza 4's worst element is the overuse of rubber bullets in most major plot points of the game. I forced myself to suspend my disbelief for this game though, because Yakuza 4 does have some simply awesome aspects, such as how it introduces Saejima and Akiyama to the franchise. My favorite moments of the game are Kiryu's fights with Akiyama and Tanimura in the sewers, the way the 4 protagonists suit up and walk together towards the final confrontation at Millennium Tower, Saejima's interactions with Majima, and the 4 bosses right at the end of the game. The way this game puts Kiryu at the end is pretty great too, as it allows the other 3 protagonists time to shine before the real star of the show shows up. If this game started with Kiryu, I think I would be less likely to like Akiyama and company, for the simple fact that they take control of the main man away from me. Starting out with Akiyama is the right place too, since he's a pretty strong character, and man, the fact that his backstory is rooted in the money explosion at the end of Kiwami is fantastic. I played Zero first, so I had been looking forward to seeing Saejima enter the story too, and he didn't disappoint. Honestly, Saejima is probably the second strongest character in the game, right behind Kiryu, and he demonstrates his strength repeatedly over the course of Yakuza 4. Tanimura is the weakest protagonist in this game, and I didn't very much like him. I'm guessing that's why he never shows up in future titles. But one weak protagonist in a lineup of otherwise top tier ones isn't that big of a deal. Number 8. Samurai are my favorite historical warriors, and the Sengoku era of Japan is my favorite period of history to read about. As such, Like a Dragon Ishin, even though it doesn't take place during the Sengoku era, is the first game in the franchise that truly grabbed my attention. I picked up this game last year to see if this franchise was something I really wanted to dive headfirst into, and this game did not disappoint. Like I said in the Dead Souls entry, spin-offs in a franchise can be a really good thing, and Ishin is an example of how to do these spin-off titles right. Reusing all of the characters and putting them in an entirely different context is a great way of reaching both a new audience and an older one. Considering how hard it is to get into a long-running franchise, spin-offs like Ishin are exactly the way to get new people interested in an old franchise, and I'm the case in point of that. The Yakuza series always seem too big to get into, and everyone always says how long each of these games are, but Ishin taught me that neither of these are major issues. With the way I play games, each Yakuza game isn't too long, making the sheer number of games not a major problem. This game is the reason I went through each Yakuza title this year and reviewed many of them, and is the reason I'll be checking out any future game RGG releases. Number 7. Yakuza 6 seeks to end the main Kiryu saga of the series, and it does a great job at that, at least until Like a Dragon brings him back into the fold. Kiryu's relationship with Haruka is one of the core cruxes of the series, and the ending of this game provides the justification for Kiryu to not be held down by Haruka and Morning Glory. Considering the way their relationship developed at the end of Yakuza 5, I like how Yakuza 6's ending eliminates the codependency nature of these two characters. They still love each other, but now they don't need to be in each other's story in order to grow, and while that does suck for the characters in question, it is clearly a good thing for the franchise moving forward, as Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth show. The themes of fatherhood ingrained in Yakuza 6 work in such a way to end Kiryu's Morning Glory and fatherhood arc, while also allowing him to reflect on his relationship with Kazuma, considering the parallel relationship Yuta and his friends have with Hirose. The focus on theme in this game is what makes the story so good, and is the major reason RGG's writing is so special in each ending. They just understand how to implement themes in ways that push their narratives to an entirely different tier of quality. Number 6. Lost Judgment is this high on the list because of its amazing gameplay. The introduction of the snake style really enhances Yagami's toolkit during gameplay, and this, in conjunction with the new XP bonus system, makes Lost Judgment the first game in the franchise I considered maxing out the main character stats in. The gameplay is just fun. If Lost Judgment's storytelling matched the quality of the gameplay and the game's themes, this game would be in the number 3 slot of this list. As it stands, Lost Judgment's story leaves something to be desired. The pacing issues of Judgment are fixed, but those issues are replaced with other ones. Yagami just doesn't seem like a good guy when he's beating up teenagers and getting into suspicious situations with underage people. This game does show that RGG is on the right track with the Judgment spin-off series, and I truly do hope Yagami gets a third game. RGG continually moves in the right direction with Yagami and his antics, and I'm fairly confident RGG can turn the spin-off series into something on par with the games making the top 5 of this list. Number 5. Man oh man, Kiwami is a good video game. Being a remake of the first game, Kiwami has all the story beats from that game, better gameplay, and the hindsight of zero. Kiwami is one of the best examples of how to properly do a faithful remake. It makes changes to the original that modernize it, while also pushing the franchise forward from the 7th gen era section of the series. Kiryu's interactions with both Majima and Nishikiyama are the real standouts of this game. The Majima Everywhere mechanic is a great love letter to the fans of Goro Majima, and the awful commando fight near the end of the game is better than in the original, though it is still awful. And Kiryu's relationship with Nishiki is built up better because of Zero. One of my favorite things about the boss fights in RGG games is the way the name of the enemy flashes on the screen as Kiryu clashes with them. And the title card that flashes when Kiryu and Nishiki clash is honestly one of the best the series has ever seen. While Nishiki is a great villain and Kiwami is a wonderful remake, the other remake of the mainline games is still a bit better. Number 4. Kiwami made the first game better, and Kiwami 2 does the same for the second game. Ryuji Goda is literally one of the best villains in the series, and he owns the show in every cutscene he's present. Ryuji's impressive size really sets him apart from the other characters in each scene, and I really like the archetype of the honorable villain. Ryuji fits this archetype perfectly, as he lets Kiryu live when he's weakened, and he kills Sengoku for the way he uses samurai and tigers to try and kill Kiryu. Also, as a side note, it is hilarious that Sengoku is the guy who has the samurai bodyguards, as it is a fun allusion to that era of Japanese history. Ryuji and Kiryu's bloody brawl next to a ticking time bomb is the greatest end to any action game I've seen in a long time. RGG are just masters of making the final encounters of each game feel epic. This game also has the double tiger boss fight that also shows up in the number 3 entry. The fact that Kiryu is able to beat both massive tigers on his own demonstrates how much stronger he is in his prime versus Ichiban and his crew. Number 3. Yakuza Like a Dragon is the perfect example of how RGG is willing to take risks in order to innovate their tried and true formula. Switching genres from 3D brawler to turn-based JRPG is an incredible risk to take, and it really worked out for RGG. It helps that Ichiban is such a likable character, and he is surrounded by an awesome supporting cast. Like a Dragon also continues the overall narrative of the series too, and the boss fights against Kiryu, Majima, and Saejima really stand out as some of the best moments of the entire game. I'm not a big fan of the Tendo boss fight because of his God Hand attack and the way he likes to target Ichiban with it, but I can look past this problem because of the overall high quality of the game. The jobs are creative, the typical Yakuza and JRPG gameplay loops are thrown on their head as they collide, and Ichiban is the perfect protagonist to follow up Kiryu. It is truly no wonder that Kasuga got a second game. Number 2. Infinite Wealth does to Like a Dragon what Lost Judgment did to Judgment. It is a massive improvement over everything introduced in Like a Dragon, and it brings Kiryu back to the forefront. The way the jobs have been changed for this game demonstrates RGG's growing JRPG design strengths, and I don't think I've ever seen a job in a JRPG as cool as Kiryu's Dragon of Dojima. The job has 3 separate styles, just like in the Kiwami and Zero days, and each style has different functions in the gameplay. On top of this, Kiryu gets a mechanic later in the game where he's able to shatter the turn-based menu, turning the game into a 3D brawler like the older titles. In this mode, he's able to do massive damage, usually wiping out whole parties of enemies. The Dragon of Dojima class is just crazy overpowered, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Kiryu's the strongest character in the franchise, and that's the way it should stay. Not even cancer can take that away from him, not until the end of Infinite Wealth anyway. Ichiban is no slouch either, and seeing both of the characters play off of each other in the story is a real treat. Considering the cancer crusading through Kiryu's body, I don't know if we'll ever see these two on screen at the same time again, which makes Infinite Wealth an even more significant title in the series. Adding to this, Infinite Wealth has one of the coolest boss fights out of any of these games with the giant shark boss. Even though Brucey Boy here isn't really that hard, it is one of the major highlights of the later parts of Infinite Wealth's main campaign. Good gameplay and a great story would be enough, but Infinite Wealth has even more with its top tier minigames. Animal Crossing, Crazy Taxi, Pokemon Snap, and more all get clones within this game, and I honestly don't know how RGG is ever gonna top this suite of minigames. They've only ever made one game I think is better to date after all. Number 1. My favorite game in the series is Yakuza 0. I know this is a cold take, but it is true. Zero has the best 3D brawler gameplay RGG has ever designed, the most well-written crime drama in all of gaming history, and allows the player to play as Majima. Because I went into this series blind and started with Ishin and Zero right after, I expected Majima to be playable again at some point in the future. And while I was disappointed that this never became the case, he is so fun to play in this game that I'll let it slide. Every single style in this game, all 8 of them are fun to use, and that means Zero has more gameplay variety than any other 3D brawler type Yakuza game made by RGG. On top of this, I really love the villains in this game. Kuze, Awano, and Shibusawa are all great antagonists for Kiryu to go up against, and while this game has had many great final boss fights, Shibusawa holds a special place for me. There's a poetry to the way symbolism is used heavily in this game, via the tattoos each Yakuza member has, and the symbolism of each tattoo plays into the major themes espoused by each character. RGG has always done this, but this game really focuses on that symbolism in ways the other games in the series don't. Zero also shows a different side of Majima than we ever get to see in future games of the franchise. I wish there were more opportunities for the Zero Majima to show his face again, but I'll have to settle for the extra story added to Kiwami 2. As it stands, Zero is the only game in the 3D brawler Yakuza titles I really want to revisit, and that's the sign of a truly amazing video game. And that's the video, my guys. What's your favorite Yakuza game? I'd love to see your ranking of all 17 games as well. Let me know all about it in the comment section below, and while you're there, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you have a moment right now, you may like one of my other videos on the screen. Regardless of what you choose to do, have an awesome day, gamers.